Hello, everybody, and welcome to a different kind of episode of They Live or Die by Film. I guess they die by film since I'm doing this one. I really want to do one of these video diary things, and I'm not going to probably make this a regular thing, but I really wanted to do it this time because I had like 62 movies I watched in October. A lot more than I have ever watched in a month, as far as I know, at least as far as I've been keeping up with like Letterboxd and stuff like that. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to kind of go through one. There's really three things I really want to do with this. One, it's a tier list of all 62 movies watched. I'll go over these tiers in just a second. Second thing is it's kind of a diary because I'm going to do these in order of which I watch them. So you'll get to see my progression throughout the month. I had to go through and like reorder all of these because when you upload them all at once, they kind of just get spread everywhere. So I've already done that. That's already done. And really, the third thing is you'll get to see like my hair do some funky things. I just got out of the shower, so there's probably going to be an ability to see a time lapse of the weird stuff my hair is going to do in like the next hour. Speaking of which, if you clicked on this to listen to me ramble for an hour, thank you. And I don't know if it's going to be an hour, but I got 62 movies to talk about, and I'm doing an intro right now. So if I'm at a minute for each one of these, it's going to be over an hour. So I guess what I'm gonna do, because this is all off the cuff. I'm not. There's no scripting with this. I don't know if people really do that with tier lists. This is not scripted. I have some bullet points, but that's really about it. So if I start to ramble, I try to cut as much of that as I can. I'll try to keep this short and concise, unlike this intro, and we'll go through there. So just to quickly go over these, I'm keeping the tier list pretty basic, but I do want to explain my reasoning for the way it's set up. So really, for the most part, there might be a few exceptions here and there. You can look at this as the top one is going to be some of my favorites. I actually have a lot, and we'll go through that in a second. So you have your 10 out of 10s, your near perfect 9 out of 10s, your great 8 out of 10s, your good 7 out of 10s. I know some people look at 7 as a 10 as a bad thing. I don't. I think 7 out of 10 is a good score. It means I would rewatch it, and I have rewatched some of these. I think that I do have it a 7 out of 10. Just it may not be frequently, but I would like to, I do go back and revisit them. And this is kind of really broad, but this one is just everything else. So even if I found a movie solid, it's going to go in here with the bad tier. And the reason I did that is I want to spend more time talking about the stuff I liked because there was a lot more of that. October is a lot of it's a lot of rewatches and it's a lot of things I've already seen or things at least I think I will really like. There are some new stuff in here. There's plenty of 2024 stuff. You probably already see some on like the top line over here. But for the most part, these are set up as me just going to be talking about what I really like. And then there's not going to be many of these, but I do have a spot for not spooky enough, which really just is going to come into it doesn't have to be a horror movie to be there. Like I'm going to have non-horror movies in these things, but really it doesn't fit the season. I may have watched it because me and my girlfriend went to the theaters or may have just felt like watching something different. There's not many of them because my girlfriend was very gracious and let me just kind of watch what I wanted to through the whole month. So shout out to her for letting me actually control the TV for a whole month. Thank God for the Steam Deck that she was on the whole time, I guess. So I don't want to go any further with this. I'm actually going to take a quick little break before we get started and try to get some water because this is going to be a long one, guys. So, all right, without further ado, let's get through these 62 movies. All right, and periodically you guys might see like some cuts here and there. I'm going to try to break this up. So one, it's a little bit easier for me to edit. And two, just because I need water. I talk a lot, but an hour straight by myself is a lot for me. So let's go ahead and get started. So when I start October season, I kind of like to start with some nostalgia stuff, some light stuff. Even though I watch horror all year, I don't know. When I think of early October, I think of like the Disney Channel or Cartoon Network playing like these things. That's kind of where I started. So with the first one, we have Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, which is a classic. This is not Return to Zombie Island, which is absolute garbage. That would be like down here somewhere if we were doing Zombie Island. But the original, I love Scooby-Doo. I have a lot of affection towards it. I watched it a lot growing up. I don't like it. I love Zombie Island, and I think it's probably the best animated movie they did. It's probably not my favorite like Scooby Doo media. It's not Mystery is Incorporated, so I think that would be up like towards here. But Scooby Doo Zombie Island is great. I have a lot of love for it. I think it's a really cool movie. I think the animation still holds up incredibly well. It has probably one of my favorite voice casts that have done the Scooby Gang. And I mean, it's like I was when I was rewatching this time, I was really impressed by like a lot of the cinematography that they had in it. Really beautiful stuff, great transitions, and I think it balanced that. Yeah, this is still for kids, but we can still try to be a little bit scary. So yeah, I think it fits great, really well. So that was on the first, if I remember correctly. Actually, I know all these first. I didn't miss a single day. So I know that was first. And then me and my girlfriend actually sat down and watched something I have not seen in a long time, which is Halloween Town. Halloween Town is something I do remember watching as a kid. I remember it on the Disney Channel. And it's not a lot I can say about it. It's good. I like it. I had a good time watching it. Would I make this a yearly tradition for me? No, but anyone who said they did, I really get it. It's very cute. It's very, what's that word when it's really sugary? Sucrine, is that the word? I think that's something like that. I probably mispronounce it, but it has that to it. It's a little goofy, but it's all intended. There's a little bit of a camp intention there, and I would like to actually go through. I don't think I've ever seen any of the sequels. So I told my girlfriend maybe next year we would go through the sequels or something because I haven't ever seen them. But yeah, neat little movie. Really enjoyed it. Let's go on to the next one, which is The Witch. I'm just going to go ahead and throw this up here. And if you hear some crashing, my cats are playing around. You might see them up here as well. So just a heads up there. Check something real quick. Yeah. So The Witch. Yeah. This is, to me, still one of the best horror films and probably one of the best films of the 2010s. It's held up incredibly well. I've really loved Eggers as a director. I think I've connected with him a lot, probably as the most of like the new age like horror guys with like Peele and Astor, who both I think have made phenomenal movies. But Eggers is just, to me, hit it out of the park every time. I'm incredibly excited for Nosferatu coming up pretty soon. Well, we got like 2 months. Yeah, like a month and a half, and then we get Nosferatu, so we'll be on his fourth film. But The Witch is incredibly atmospheric. I probably watch this about every October. There's just something about it. Like, it doesn't necessarily take place in the fall or anything like that, but it just fits, that New England dreary aesthetic that feels like England. You can kind of understand why they went there. It just, this thing's shot like it is shot in England or something, with how dreary it looks, which I can already hear some people who are from Britain telling me that I'm wrong, but that's, as my ignorant American, it all seems dreary to me. But yeah, The Witch is great. Black Phillip, to me, is just as much of an icon as Billy or anyone else of the 21st century. Great movie. Definitely a 10 out of 10. I've watched it numerous times since I saw it in theaters. All right. With that, we're going to actually get to our first 2024 movie, and this is a weird one, and it is Sharkers. I'll throw it out here. So Sharkers came out this year. It is on Tubi, and I'm actually going to check because I'm curious. It apparently has had 95 people watch it on Letterboxd, and its rating distribution is just all the way across the board. It is an odd little movie, and it's great. It really is. The best way I can describe it is you take the director, Harmony Korine, the guy who did Spring Breakers, like give him $200 to make like an unsanctioned After Hours remake. And then when he goes off on like a coke bender, because you'd have to be to make this movie, Nicholas Winding Refn comes and finishes it up in like a week. That's Sharkers. I don't really want to say too much beyond that. It's just kind of a wild ride of being really over the top, and it does feel coke fueled. And I think it's going to have one of those issues where people watch it and they think it's trying to be purposely bad. I don't think it's even purposely bad. I think it's just a good movie, but it definitely is tongue in cheek. It's definitely very extreme, very cool. It's just a cool movie. It's very funny. Like it's intentionally funny. So yeah, if you got like, I think it's short too. I think it's like less than an hour and a half. It's on Tubi for free. Go watch Sharkers. I was very surprised by this one. I really have loved this one for the year. All right, next is The Wild Robot. Obviously, not spooky enough. Now, having said that, I'm gonna keep this short. The movie is really beautiful. I probably either saw this at the best time or the worst time with some stuff I had going on in my personal life. Made me very what is there's a word, there's a thing my girlfriend says and I'm sitting here trying to remember it. It's like weepy. That's kind of how I felt watching it because of with everything going on. But really beautiful movie. The animation's great. I haven't seen a lot of animation this year, but yeah, I'm not going to be upset if this ends up winning like best animated film. But yeah, let's not too much on that. Next one, we are going to go to Satan's Little Helper. And if I seem to stop for a second before I put anything up, and if you see my phone come up, I'm not just texting. I just got trying to remember kind of where I put things, like, because I already did a ranking, so I could kind of keep this concise, so I wouldn't be overthinking it. But yeah, so this one is good. I've actually seen this a few times. This was one I saw on Netflix years and years ago when Netflix used to actually have like a really good horror selection. Like it's kind of, they used to be kind of what Tubi is now, where they'd have these like really random movies, but they ended up being fantastic. And we'll get to another one in a minute. So I'll just go ahead and kind of go through this spiel. But I've seen it a few times since then. It's essentially, if you've never seen it, Severin, I think, put out this a couple years ago. But basically, it's about a kid who is obsessed with this game called Satan's Little Helper. And he meets up with a guy dressed up as Satan and who is actually just a serial killer. So the kid is helping him, but I guess he kind of looks at it as it's just a game. And the guy ends up coming to the family's house. And I mean, the guy who plays the Satan character, he is so fantastic in this. He's very over the top. He's very theatric. He never says anything throughout the film, but he's just like this agent of chaos who's just murdering people. And he's just, it's not just blindly murdering people either. I watching the film, it's always impressive to kind of see that there does seem to be like a method in the madness sort of thing. Some things I do think are probably unintentionally funny. Like, I feel like the kid character was written to be like 5 or 6 years old, and he's like 9 or 10. There's a whole thing where he's in love with like his sister, who's like 18 or 19 in the movie. She's in college, and yeah, I feel like that would make sense for like little kids who don't really understand that. 9 or 10 is stretching that a little bit, but honestly, it brings a lot of humor to it because I don't know. It's just it's a weird subplot that I don't know, gives it a little bit of charm. Next, we are going to go to another one I found on Netflix years ago. So I think, if I remember correctly, this was supposed to come out in like 2014, but it got shelved for like 2 or 3 years and didn't end up on Netflix until like 2017. But it's called Dig Two Graves. Essentially, it's about this girl whose brother is killed. I'm not gonna say killed. He dies because they go to jump in the quarry. She ends up getting scared and doesn't do it. And he does, and he actually ends up dying. They weren't doing his suicide. They were just supposed to jump in the quarry because they're kids and they're having fun. So she's dealing with like all this trauma, and she meets these 3 men who, what's the correct terminology now? Romanov? Because I don't think we really say gypsy anymore. I think that one's considered more offensive now. So these people who seem to be Romanov, I'm going to go with that. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Who offer her a chance to bring her brother back in exchange for taking someone else's life. And they give her a boy who goes to her school. And it's really about her dealing with it. And there's obviously like a lot of different things going on. Like there's something, like they're already sketchy because they're asking this little girl and they're showing her these magic tricks. And it does one of my favorite things in horror where it becomes a question: is it actually supernatural, or is it, is something really going, is this some kind of trick, or is it supernatural? And I really love that. I think that is just a really cool way to dig into a film, to leave the audience kind of thinking about that throughout. And the movie looks beautiful. It's incredibly slow paced. I mean, even for the short runtime, I'm actually gonna look how much this is. It is 85 minutes, and it's a slow 85 minutes, but not in a bad way. I think it's paced well. It's just not in a hurry to get anywhere. And it's slowly unraveling what's going on. So it's got this mystery element to it too. Really cool, like rural area type of thing. It plays a little bit with everything. And while there might be a worry that there is something offensive with the Romanov thing, I feel like I'm getting that wrong, and somebody's going to correct me. But you know what I'm saying. It isn't by the end, and you can kind of see what's going on. So if that's a worry, I would put that aside because I actually think they handle that element incredibly well. All right, so next one, we are going to go to a movie that finally is getting a Blu-ray release. I actually just ordered it off the Vinegar Syndrome site, and that's Murder Party. So, Murder Party. When me and my girlfriend started dating like 7 years ago, I started getting her into horror, and this is one I think I showed her too early because it is a very, very funny movie. It's a very good horror comedy, basically about this guy who he's invited. He just finds an invitation for something called a murder party. It's near Halloween, so he builds like a little night costume made out of cardboard, and he seems to be kind of a lonely guy with not a lot of backbone. So he goes, and it turns out to just be a bunch of pretentious art students who want to make his death basically an art project to get a grant from this pretentious art dude. And it's obviously commenting a lot about that scene, and it's made by Jeremy Saulnier, which I think I said that right. I used to say Saulner, but I feel like I've learned somewhat recently that is the incorrect way to say it. But the guy who made Green Room, Blue Ruin, Hold the Dark, and Rebel Ridge, which I think he's a fantastic genre bender type of director. I think he plays a lot around with different genres. He really has this interesting idea of how to like shoot violence where it's really well shot violence, but it's never glorified. And I think he starts that a lot here where, he's mixing a lot of the comedy to it. So it almost feels like it shouldn't be taken seriously, but he continues to add this weight anytime there's violence on screen of any sort. And Murder Party's funny. It's a strange one. It definitely feels like a first movie at times, but you can kind of still see the makings of a guy who is going to be great within the genre. So definitely check out Murder Party. To finish that story, I showed my girlfriend this. She did not like it, even though I think in that last 7 years, calling each other a dildo randomly has still been something that's happened for the last 7 years that came from this movie. So without further ado, we're going to move on. Yes, that's where that one's at. So we're going to move on to Your Next, which is also in the great. I'm going to put it on top. Your Next is one I have rewatched a ton. This is one I have almost put like right here in the near perfect section. Many of you, if you're into horror, you've probably seen Your Next. It's kind of a subversive slasher home invasion movie where this girl from Australia, she goes with her boyfriend to their rich parents' house for some type of get together. I don't know if it ever specifies what they're there for. And suddenly a group of masked men come to invade the home and kill everyone with what seems to be like military efficiency. But it turns out, unlike in most cases, your final girl here, Erin, is actually a survivalist. So she, while everyone else is panicking, she is trying to go through the correct way to go about this the best that she can. She builds traps. She tries to outsmart them. She doesn't panic. Really fun final girl. Really great subversion. If you haven't seen it by any chance, I would say it's dark comedy, a black comedy, probably more accurate. But the horror stuff is done phenomenally. I've been very critical of Wingard for a long time, especially in his more recent output. But I think this and a movie we're going to talk about much later are, his best stuff. And it's not even really close. All right. So our next 2024 movie is What's Inside. So What's Inside, I have put right after Sharkers. So it's right here. So what's inside is a sci-fi body horror film. Essentially, these people are getting together for their friend's bachelor party. And basically, one of the guys they haven't spoken to in a long time brings a device that allows them to switch bodies. It allows their consciousness to know each other. So they play a game called Werewolf. Hilarity ensues for a while until something, as you can guess, being a horror film, goes horribly, horribly wrong. Really stylistic movie. I was very impressed with the editing and the style of the film. I think for some it might be overbearing. I'm a sucker for like a lot of style in a movie, especially for a Netflix movie, which can kind of all look the samey. For the most part, this one at least like differentiates itself pretty well. It's, I guess, in some ways, it's like Possessor. If you've seen that from Baby Cronenberg, Brandon, but not nearly that good. It's good. It's just not this good. Fun movie though. A lot of twists and turns. I'm a little not sure if I'm sold by the end of this film, but everything leading up to it's really fun. The characters are complete assholes, so if you're looking for likable characters, you're not going to find this here. This is a lot like bodies, bodies, bodies. But I will. I did have someone tell me their description of this, which was Pretty Little Liars on crack, and I think that works too. So bodies, bodies, bodies definitely fits. Pretty Little Liars on crack also fits really well. All right, so next we're going to go into the newest Hellboy movie. I'm sure many of you sitting here saying there was a new Hellboy movie this year. Yes, there was, and it was fine. Yeah, it was fine. I think it was kind of overhated because when the trailer came out, there was all this talk about like how bad the movie looks because it's not this high budget Del Toro movie or the big studio 2018 or 2019, whatever fucking year that came out, that terrible one. So it was designed a lot more like a low budget horror film. And I think in a lot of ways it does work for that. Like, I think the guy who plays Hellboy actually does a really good job. Like, I think he's going to unfortunately not be talked about much as far as the three people who have played him. Because one, everybody wants Ron Perlman. But two, I just think this guy captures, the spirit of what's going on. He puts a lot of effort into his performance. I really, he doesn't just try to emulate Ron Perlman or if anyone would desire David Harbour's performance. He makes it his own, and I haven't read these comics, so I can't talk about accuracy. I have heard that a lot of people who just like the comics really did kind of dig this one. I wish it had a little bit more horror elements to it. There are a few, but it doesn't really, like, to me, it doesn't pay off its premise of being this like lower budget horror film. You might hear a cat fight in a second. They're being moody. This lower budget horror film. And that's okay. I mean, like I said, the movie is fine. I didn't think it was as bad as people thought it was going to be. And it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. I was actually looking forward to the low budget horror element. But, decent little movie. Nothing special. Let's move on to the next 2024 film, which is Azrael. So I absolutely love Samara Weaving. Modern scream queen. This premise is, so the hard part about this one is it is not a silent film, but it might as well be. I think there is very little dialogue in this movie, and there's very little hand holding in this movie. So we talked about You're Next earlier, which was written by Simon Barrett, who I have become a big fan of as a writer, and he directed a movie called Seance, which I wanted to get to this month, but maybe next year if I do this again, you're going to hear more about Seance. But he did write Azrael as well, and it's kind of hard to go into this one because I really feel like I need to see it again to kind of have an idea of what's really going on, because like I said, there's not an exposition dump. These people do not speak. I don't know if it's from not having the ability to, or the choosing not to, or something else of that matter. There's a lot of hints and there's a lot of world building throughout the film, but you're never going to hear it verbalized. The movie is asking you to look at the scenes and figure out exactly what's going on. And I think it's brilliant in that sense. I'd love to sit there and rewatch it. I think the body performance from Samara Weaving and her facial expressions are fantastic. I think she expresses a lot even without ever saying anything. It's a different movie, and I think it's on Shudder now. I had to rent it, if I remember correctly, because I got it before it got on Shudder. But really good movie. All right. So next we're going to move on to House of Usher. This is the 1960 Roger Corman film. It's good. I lost it. It's good. I'd actually put it pretty high. I actually wanted to get it a little bit higher. Can I move that over? Or can I do this? Yeah, here we go. So, beautiful looking film. Anyone who's familiar with the Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe films, you know, they have a very specific look to them. They're very gothic. They look beautiful. Roger Corman was much more known as a producer, but his directing abilities were always fantastic. You know, it's not as good as Mask or Pendulum to me, but House of Usher is still a very, very solid movie. All right, we're going to move on to Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and because I just talked about an old movie, people are going to think it's crazy. I put this above it. Scary Stories is something I think we need more of in horror, in the sense that it's not perfect. I do have a lot of issues with Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. But one thing I do like about it is I think it does a great job of being this introduction horror film to like preteens and teens. Like, look, I watched a lot of R-rated movies when I was very young, probably younger than I should have been. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I also think that for people who might be a little bit more scared, or, you know, sometimes people don't want to go straight to the Carolina Reaper. Sometimes you got to star them with a jalapeno. And I think that's what Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark does well. It's beautifully shot. Like, Andre Overdahl, which I probably butchered his name, I really like him. I think he fails to meet up to an expectation that I have for him, and that may not be his fault. That might just be my fault. But he creates such a sense of atmosphere. He just sometimes doesn't always pay off what I hope he does. I still think Troll Hunter and what's another one it does? The Autopsy of Jane Doe are both really fantastic. Like, if that's where the height of his career, it's a good career. I do think this and Last Voyage of the Demeter. Last Voyage, I was super stoked for. And I think it's a decent little movie. It's just missing something. I think his movies miss a little bit of bite. But that actually works in this one's favor. There is some horror stuff in it. And it does kill kids. So, you know, I'm always down for that. But, you know, it basically takes, I think, three of the book stories. It's been a long time since I've read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And kind of mixes them all together. I think it's a really cool movie. It gets a little bit too much into the exposition of what's going on. I would have just rather it just been a little bit more of a mood piece. But, you know, like I said, this is for kids. This is for teenagers. And I think it succeeds in that. And I also think the Lana Del Rey Season of the Witch is like my favorite version of that song. So it's got that going for it. All right. So in theaters, I got to see Terrifier 3. I guess I should get a little background on my feelings on Terrifier. I absolutely despise the first movie. I think it's really bad. Really, really bad. I think it's nothing more than... It's just not good. It's not a good movie. I hated watching it. I've seen it twice. I think David Howard Thornton's Art the Clown is well acted, even though I don't really care for the design all that much. And the gore is well done. I just don't like how squishy it is. Like, it doesn't really hit for me because it just feels too playful in a way. And, you know, I won't go more than that. But I actually liked the second one. So if the first one, I think I gave it like a 2 out of 10. I really, really hate that movie. And then Terrifier 2, I gave a 7 out of 10. I actually thought the switch to being more plot focused, even at the 2.5 hours, I actually thought it was pretty cool to go to like this kind of fantasy type movie. And I really love Sienna as a protagonist. I think she's a really, really good protagonist. And the actress, I wish I could think of her name right off the top of my head. I think she's great. I was very impressed for them going to some of the worst slasher characters I've seen in modern time to Sienna, who I think is, has a legitimate right to be called like a good final girl and things like that. So I was looking forward to Terrifier 3, even though I was still cautious. And honestly, I thought it was a big step down. Like, I still think it's much better than the first one. But it does the same sort of thing. Even though it's like 30 minutes less than the second movie, I still think the pacing on this one's so off. It feels more like like honestly, the film kind of feels like it takes back to its roots of being like All Hallows Eve, where it's an anthology film. But this one's kind of awkward because it feels like it's an anthology film where the main plot is just the wraparound, which I guess could work. It just doesn't work here. I think it doesn't flow very well. I think the kills are like, okay, so they made a big deal about killing a kid at this one, which is, you'll hear me talk about. I don't think anyone should be protected in a horror film, blah blah blah. But it was one of those things where I thought it wanted its cake and it didn't, and it ate it too. Where it doesn't actually show that first kid's death, and then it just kind of shows a little bit of the aftermath of it. And I thought that was kind of weak, to be honest. Like, for a movie that wants to talk about pushing boundaries, I said, an R-rated Feast movie did that 20 years ago. That actually showed it a little bit more. So I don't know. I was a little disappointed. I think it doesn't. I think it took a step back in the plot, and I think I'm always going to have an issue with the gore. I think it's not that the gore is bad. I just don't think it's all that interesting. I think it's too gooey. Like, it just, I guess it's like, who is that guy? Wizard of Gore sort of stuff, which is fine. I think it works for that aesthetic. It just doesn't work for me here. Same sort of thing. So let's move on to The Fall of the House of Usher, which is Mike Flanagan's last show for Netflix. And this is my second time through it. I watched it last year, and I watched it again this year, and I absolutely love this movie. Not this movie, but this show. Flanagan is so good at creating these very, very likable characters. And what I kind of like about Fall of House of Usher is all the people he usually gets are all dirtbags in this. You're watching these 6 kids of Roderick Usher get killed in various ways through Poe stories, whether it's the pendulum, or it's the black cat, or it's the gold bug. And there's so many references throughout this whole thing to tell its story. It's obviously comes from someone who has a lot of affinity for Poe, and I watched it this time, and I just reread Poe early this year, like in January after the show. I really wanted to get to it. And the amount of references you're able to pick up, like from scene to scene, is so impressive. And they're not random, and they're not forced. He created a Poe world, and it's really cool to see. I don't think it exceeds Midnight Mass or another thing for Flanagan we're going to talk about in a minute, but I still think it's one of his best ones. I think it was very underappreciated when it came out, and I'm hoping, even though he's left Netflix, this will find an audience, because I think it's really good. All right, so now we're going to get on to some Wes Craven here and go to Cursed. So Cursed is a werewolf film that Wes Craven did in the mid-2000s, that has Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg and Joshua Jackson. I mean, it basically had the that mid-2000s cast into it, and it's decent. I think it's a solid little movie. It's unfortunate about the CGI. And it's unfortunate that it sounds like the script changed a lot. I think that it does a lot of really smart things. But the thing I will always give Craven as a director is he can find the iconic. I'll badmouth Scream 3 to anybody who'll listen. But you'll never hear me say that the part where Ghostface like shows his bulletproof vest isn't like some super iconic shit. Like, as bad as that movie is, that part's awesome. And Cursed isn't quite as bad as Scream. I'd actually think it's a pretty decent movie, but it has the same sort of thing. Like the scene of the werewolf flipping off Christina Ricci is iconic. It's hilarious, and I think that was probably one of the things the movie does struggle a little bit with, is finding a consistent tone that it can stick with. And I mean, it's Kevin Williamson's script, so it's supposed to definitely have some comedy, some meta. And I think it does work. I think a lot of it does work, but a lot of it also doesn't work as well as I would like it to. So with that, we're going to move on to Willy's Wonderland, which is actually my second time seeing this, and we're going to put it right behind Cursed. Willy's Wonderland stars Nick Cage in Five Nights at Freddy's. That's pretty much what it is. You get to see him be a silent protagonist, kicking a lot of ass of animatronics. And if it was just that, I think the movie's better. However, they throw in like this teen plot about them trying to shut down, and I just don't care. They're really boring. The movie kind of looks like shit because they have a weird filter over it on the outside scenes. But I do have fun with this movie. Watching Nick Cage, like, there's a joke in the thing where the guy tells him to take breaks because the whole thing is they're trying to steal his car and just sacrifice him to these animatronic gods. And the whole time he's like, now make sure you take breaks. So he's over there cleaning and he has it set on his watch. So there's a part where like he's going to fight this like one animatronic and his beeper goes off and he goes and takes a break. He goes and plays the pinball machine, drinks a soda, puts on a new t-shirt. He does that like every time. And it's very funny. Nick Cage is great at body acting. And I think this was a cool challenge for him to not have a single word in the film and still deliver a great performance because dude's not phoning it in. He's by far the best part of this film. This film would be a whole lot lower if he's not in it, but we don't have to talk about the hypothetical because he is in it. So we're going to move on to Psycho 3. Now, Psycho 3 is technically, I have seen this before, but I was a kid when I saw it and I just do not remember it anymore. I was really like struggling from here to here, and I'm going to put it at the top of here for now. I am a big fan of the Psycho sequels. I think they are way too overhated. I think Psycho sequels always have the issue of having to have this idea of people thinking, well, it's a sequel to Psycho. It can't be any good. And, you know, I don't agree with Tarantino on a lot of takes. I will agree with him that Psycho 2 is better than Psycho 1, but they're both phenomenal films. Psycho 2 is just, it takes this idea, it almost does this legacy sequel thing way before any of these other ones we're going to talk about here in a little bit did it. But essentially it becomes a character study of him and, you know, him dealing with 20 years later, having to deal with how his life changed as he comes back out in the outside world. And Psycho 3 continues on to that. It keeps it as a character piece of Norman Bates having to deal with the events that happened in the last movie, which I won't spoil, and just trying to be a good person and, you know, his mental health declining repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. And, you know, there's a lot of tragedy with it. Anthony Perkins directed this. This was one of 2 movies he ever directed. And apparently he didn't think very highly of himself for how he directed this one and didn't direct much after that. And I think that's a mistake. The dude has some great transitions. He blocks incredibly well. But I mean, it's a great movie. I really think more people should go to these Psycho sequels because there's a good character study slasher here that you don't get enough of even now. So yeah, great movie, Psycho 3. So I have actually in the last couple years been going back to some of my movies that I loved as a teen, and they're pretty typical stuff. You know, you have your Fight Club, you have your Boondock Saints, and you have Donnie Darko. I have not seen Donnie Darko since I was a teenager. And, you know, I went in, and my girlfriend had never seen it. And I remembered it kind of took place on Halloween. I think the movie, I seem to remember that the date on his arm was Halloween Day. And I was correct, so good memory by me. This movie is, I just got to pat myself on the back here. I still had good taste as a teen. I don't care. This movie still rules. Jake Gyllenhaal gives a great performance. Many of you have probably seen this, so I'm not going to concentrate on it. But good movie. So we're going to move on to Resident Evil. All right, so Resident Evil. We're just going to go ahead and throw it right here. Decent little movie. Fun action. Way too long. This movie does not need... it should be like 90 minutes. How long is this movie? It is 100 minutes. It should be like 10 or 15 minutes shorter. I think it would pace itself better. Really cool scenes, though. I always like a Paul W.S. Anderson film. Not my favorite of his. I don't think it's as good as like Death Race or AVP or Event Horizon, but it's solid. It's a solid. It was probably the best example of a video game adaptation we had for a long time. All right, so now we're going to go on to The Void, which is let's see. I'm going to put that. Let's put this about right here. So, actually, I'm going to move it up one more spot. I think we're going to put it right here. So, The Void is a 2016 film, I think. I think it was like 2016. It was basically to take an idea of let's make a modern day Carpenter film. And do practical effects, and it obviously has a lot of love and affinity for The Thing and Assault on Precinct 13, and it still does its own thing. It's not just like a best of John Carpenter, but I do think it's got some cool stuff to it. I think the characters are a little I think that's really what holds it back, because I don't really care about the characters that much. And I always call it the Carnage Park effect, that me and my friend came up with when you'd watch a movie and you get to the last act and you feel like somewhere down the line you got drunk watching it, because you really don't really understand what's even going on anymore. And The Void has that issue, where I get to the end. I've seen this movie like 3 times since it came out in 2016. So 3 times every 10 years is a decent amount, or really 8 years. But I still don't 100% always capture what the hell's going on by the end. But yeah, I enjoy watching it. It's great practical effects. It's just flawed. All right, so this is another one I have not seen in quite a long time, which is As Above, So Below. Found footage movie. Looks like we're going to be able to put that right here. So, As Above, So Below is kind of like if National Treasure was a horror found footage movie. That's really it. So you get a lot of world building with what they're looking for. They're looking for the Philosopher's Stone. Q, which I'm going to totally forget the part where Hermione says that in Sorcerer's Stone, but I'm not going to put it in here, so just pretend it's there. You basically have them going down into the French catacombs, Paris catacombs. I actually don't know what the official thing is. We're just going to call it either one. Go down there, and yeah, it gets trippy as fuck, and there's a lot of cool stuff that happens, and they get lost. So if you want a little bit more than Blair Witch, where they're fighting about a map in the woods for 60 minutes, you get a lot more that happens in this getting lost in a place and not knowing where you're going. So there's always that going on. So yeah, As Above, So Below. All right. Gonna move up a little bit. All right, so now we're gonna move on to Doctor Sleep. And no, it's not going there. It's actually going here. So Doctor Sleep was a movie I saw in theaters. I was very few people who saw this movie in theaters, unfortunately. I think to this day it's the best thing Mike Flanagan has ever made. And he adapted a pretty mediocre King book and made it something special. And, I think one thing I like about Flanagan is he continues to challenge himself as a director, and being able to get King to understand the affinity for Kubrick's Shining and get him to accept that movie is a place all on its own, in all honesty. It's really good. Like, I just, every time I watch it, I'm just more and more impressed by it. I always used to have this as, because I always said The Witch was the best 2010s horror movie, and this last time it just pushed it over for me. I think it's so good. I think Rose the Hat, played by Rebecca Ferguson, is really great. I think the director's cut of this is very underappreciated. I think if Warner Brothers puts it out, I don't think it makes more money, but I think it gets more recognition now. That director's cut is probably to this day still the best King adaptation of anything, even though it changes significantly in the third act, but it does it in a way so it's not trying to look down on Kubrick's Shining. Obviously, Flanagan has a lot of love for it and for the book. So really great. Ewan McGregor as Danny Torrance is still awesome. So yeah, with that, we're going to move on to Rumors, which is another 2024 film. I was going to have this here, and over time, I still love it, but I'm going to put it here. I think somebody called it, like, I think one of the trailers has it as like Doctor Strangelove meets Night of the Living Dead, which is accurate enough. It's a Strangelove movie. I don't know if anybody here's ever watched like a Guy Madden movie. They're weird. They're kind of a mess. I don't really know how else to put it besides that. They're not a mess. Like, he obviously has a very interesting vision, and it's just not always for me. I watched The Forbidden Door. Maybe. It's like the forbidden something. It's like a door or something. Forbidden way. I don't know. But I watched that. It was not for me. It's cool aesthetic, but it doesn't really work for me. This one did. I don't get half the jokes in this movie. I think for somebody who's really into modern day world politics, there's a lot of great jokes here that, even though I didn't get them, I still thought they were funny. Me and my girlfriend had a blast watching this. We really did. I was very surprised because I didn't go in with a lot of expectation. I just thought the trailer was kind of funny. But yeah, so Rumors, fun movie. Go see it. It's probably going to be out on video on the band or whatever pretty soon. All right, next one. We actually did a double feature that night. Second movie we saw was Saturday Night, which, as you can guess, is not spooky enough. We'll put it here. So Saturday Night. I liked it. It's kind of like Uncut Gems, but less bleak. Because that Saturday Night Live becomes the thing, unfortunately. Not unfortunately. There's some good episodes of Saturday Night Live, but hasn't been in a long time. All right, so let's move on to Exorcist, The Beginning. This is the movie that was taken from Paul Schrader, and so there's two versions of this movie. I have not watched Dominion yet. I saw it a long time ago, but I don't remember it. This movie is trash. It's kind of funny. We're going to talk about David Gordon Green here very soon, as you can kind of see down here. But it's kind of funny to me that people call Exorcist Believer the worst Exorcist film. Just have to question if they saw Exorcist The Beginning, because this movie is absolute garbage. The movie was taken from Schrader and made by Ronnie Harlan. I like Ronnie Harlan's films, some of them. They are very on different they're on different tiers when it comes to being directors. So there's some awkward editing in this where I'm pretty sure they're using some of Schrader's work, because sometimes you're like, wow, that looks really pretty. Why does the rest of this movie look like garbage? And then there'll be some weird editing tricks where it's almost like that scene in Taken 3 where they're trying to show Liam Neeson hopping a fence and they have to cut 87 times. That happens several times in this movie. Like I said, some beautiful iconography for a very, very boring and dull movie. I'm very interested to watch Dominion. I think Ebert was a big fan of Dominion, so I'm very curious about that. All right. So in theaters, I got to go see Smile 2. I really liked Smile 1. I was surprised how much I liked Smile 1 because it just kind of seemed like a generic studio horror film, nothing special. And I'm impressed. I'm going to put it here in great if it'll go. So this one, if you've seen the first one, so you kind of get the premise. It's a curse film where these people, before they kill themselves, give this big smile, and then whoever saw them, that smile demon thing is going to come after them, essentially. And then the cycle will continue forever. This one's about a rock star who is coming back from kind of a rough personal issues where she's trying to better herself and things like that. And so you kind of know where Smile 2 is going to end, because if they don't pay off that premise the way you expect them to, it's just disappointing. And I'm not necessarily going to spoil it, but this movie's really good, and I think it handles that well. I think I like the first one a bit better, only because I really like Kyle Gallner in the first one, and he is in this one for a little bit. But I think it is missing that type of presence. I know they don't want to go into the mystery element because we've already know what this is for the most part. They do a lot to explain this. And I think they do add a lot to the lore here without it just being, let's dump all this exposition. I think they, you learn in a very natural way on how this smile demon or whatever works, or virus, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I'm still not sold that this guy can properly do a possession remake, because I don't think anyone on this planet can do that movie justice. But you know what? At least if they're going to pick a studio guy, I think he's a good choice. I think he'll at least respect the material, and I think he'll bring something interesting. At least I hope. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my hope. Whew, all right, so probably people sitting here watching are like, okay, none of this seems too bad. This all seems, hopefully, up to snuff. I don't think I have anything too wild out of the gates. Maybe a little bit here. Some people might think it's a little high. But we're going to get into David Gordon Green's Halloween Kills. So I'm going to put this here for right now while I talk about it. So I absolutely love Halloween Kills, and I have wrote lots of stuff about Halloween Kills and why I love it so much. And I don't really want to like rehash this for people who have been a fan of They Live by Film, who've heard me talk about this. So I'm going to try to keep this brief because I do think it's fair. I do not, and I didn't. I saw this opening night with my mom, and I didn't understand it then, and I don't really understand it now. Why Halloween Kills is as hated as it is. People do things like The Evil Dies Tonight, which is these characters are dumb, and people can sit there and say it's a cop out that's intentional. But I feel like during I don't think you can say this on YouTube. The vid 18+1. I think we learned a lot about people in a group. So there's gonna be some weird stuff here. It goes here. It goes right here. Masterpiece. It really is. I think it's the best Halloween sequel to date. I don't even think it's close. I think it does so much great stuff. It's funny to me the way I hear people talk about Terrifier franchise, where they're like, oh man, just look at the kills. And then I heard people legitimately complain that there were too many kills and kills, which it kind of told you up front. But there's an actual story. Like that's one thing I think the Green does really well is he captures the Haddonfield in such an interesting and nuanced way. To me, Haddonfield is the main character of this film, and how they develop and how they come together. And I think there's a lot of beauty to this film. Like people complain about the hospital patient sequence, which I think is still a great sequence. I think it's the heart of the film. I think it's the thematic line of what Green's trying to get across. And one day I would like to talk about this trilogy more in depth. So I'm going to kind of stop it here because we got to go on to Halloween Ends, which for the moment I'm going to put right here. As much as I thought, people really hated my opinion of Kills, I think people have softened on it. One thing I have noticed people have not softened on is the final in David Gordon Green's trilogy, Halloween Ends, which takes a new character that you have not seen before and kind of tells his story. And I think there is a good reason to do it. I think Corey as a character is really good. I think he's a phenomenal character. I think he is this representation of both Laurie and Michael in his own unique way. And yeah, it was jarring to think of the idea that we're going to end this trilogy with a character we've never seen. But the more I watch this film, the more I love it. Like I think I don't think it's as good as Kills. I don't think we're there, and I don't think I'm ever going to get quite there. But straight up, this is near perfect to me. I mean, it really is. Like I know that these are going to be probably my hottest takes during this, but I think David Gordon Green's trilogy is brilliant. I all the way through, and I think I don't know what else to say. Like I said, I want to do a longer video on that trilogy eventually, so I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not going to get them all out here. All right. So we're going to go on to The Purge. And I have seen these, and I'm a fan of the series for the most part. But the first one is more of a proof of concept movie. It's fine. Like, I know I'm putting it pretty low, but it's because I actually haven't watched anything too bad up to this point. It's a home invasion movie, and if you've never seen The Purge, essentially one night on the year, I think it's like the first day of spring, the laws are no longer in effect for one night, for like 12 hours. And I think the Purge series has kind of, how do I put it? I think it has not lived up to its full potential. I think the closest it comes is Anarchy, which I still think is the best film by far of the series. The first one has good acting with Ethan Hawke. I think it gives like a little bit of what the series is going to be, but it also isn't nearly as goofy and fun as the later sequels are. So it just kind of feels like a little bit of a slog to get through at times. Cool proof of concept. I'm glad it became a franchise, but it is what it is. All right, so now we're going to do some build up here. We're going to be looking at Curse of the Blair Witch. I'll put it right here for just a moment. Curse of the Blair Witch is essentially a mockumentary that kind of, like, if you were confused regarding what even the hell is the Blair Witch when you watch the Blair Witch Project, because they don't really just exposition dump unless you count the beginning where they're doing interviews with people. But even then, they don't tell you a whole lot about the witch. This will answer pretty much everything you could have wanted. They really go into like who Rustin Parr is, who the witch is, like what has happened in the area since then. If you just want hey, I just want to know what the hell's going on, this is the movie for you. It really is. You're gonna get everything you could ever wanted. It used to come with a VHS double stack with the movie. I remember having it. I think I still got a copy wrapped up somewhere. But yeah, it's well done. And the thing I think I like about Curse of the Blair Witch is they're using this footage from different areas. They got footage from the 70s, they got footage from the 40s, and there is so much work and detail to try to make them feel authentic. Obviously, they're still using shorthand. Hey, it's the 70s. This guy's gonna look a little hippie-ish. But I think when you're only working with a couple minutes at a time, I think it's incredibly effective to like sell that. The camera footage looks different in each one. It looks like they even use different. I don't know if they did. I don't know if this is just edited or they legitimately use different footage. But it's really cool and it helps sell. Like the thing that we're going to talk about Blair Witch here later, but the thing that makes Blair Witch so effective is how well it sells its world. And like, people thought this shit was real. You have to sell that. And they do such a good time and time again about doing that. All right. So next is iRobot. Yeah, it's not spooky at all. So we'll just move on. All right, so now we're going to move on to... Actually, I had never seen this. I was very excited to see it, which is... Is it really going to be the top one? Okay, I know where it goes. All right, so we are going to be looking at Ginger Snaps. Go right here. Ginger Snaps, to me, is if you've ever seen the movie May, and you think of that as like a mumblecore Frankenstein movie. Think of this as like a mumblecore early 2000s werewolf movie. Essentially, it's about these sisters, and they're going through growing up. They both have had late menstrual cycles. We'll say that. So they actually use this idea of using the menstrual cycle as the allegory and the werewolf and things like that. And it's really well done because it seems like it was birthed from the idea that roughly your menstrual cycle comes every 28 days. The moon is 28-day phases. It's kind of brilliant. Like, I got to give it credit. That's just kind of a cool way to think about it. And the cast is great. The killings are good. The transformations, it does its own ideas. And I think if you're into werewolf films and you haven't gotten a chance to see Ginger Snaps, it's worth checking out. So let's move on to... What is this one? Upgrade. All right. That is spooky enough. I'm just laying it here. I probably should just stop saying that. But Upgrade. So essentially, if you've never seen Upgrade, Lee Winnell, who is famous for writing Saw and playing Adam, this was his second directorial debut. Not debut. His second directorial effort after Insidious Chapter 3. And essentially, it's about a guy who is paralyzed during an attack where he is attacked and his wife is murdered. And he is paralyzed from the neck down. And this takes place in the close future. So this guy offers him a chance to have this thing put in his neck called STEM that will allow his body to work again. Essentially, it is an AI component that he has in the back of his neck. So Upgrade is phenomenal. It really is. I'm actually going to put it right here. Upgrade oozes a lot of style. We're going to hear John Carpenter a lot because I think a lot of directors have that influence from him, especially when we look at more modern directors. And Upgrade's no different. I think there's a score type. I don't even know if it's quite synth, but it definitely wants to pretend, not necessarily pretend to be, but it wants to use those elements. The look of the film is great. Winnell is very talented in making a very grimy, futuristic aesthetic. I'm really looking forward to his Wolfman, but yeah, Upgrade. So let's move on to Willow's Creek. Now, I've showed my girlfriend a lot of movies, a lot of horror movies since we've been together for 7 years. If you were to ask her, what is the scariest movie I have ever showed her, and I show her tons of horror movies every year, it is Willow Creek. So Willow Creek, we're going to put it right after, well, we're not there yet. Right after you're next. Yeah, it sounds right. Yeah, I agree with that. I had to double check. I was like, that's close with Ginger Snaps. But yeah, that's right. So Willow Creek is a found footage Bigfoot movie where this couple goes out because the boyfriend is obsessed with Bigfoot and he wants to do this like little mockumentary thing out in Willow Creek. Fun fact, I have been to Willow Creek. I've gotten to take pictures next to the wooden Bigfoot statue. I did not get to, unfortunately, go inside like the Bigfoot like diner and stuff like that because it was during the vid 18+1. I was doing a road trip then. So it was a lot of really cool to see. It was really cool to watch this movie and see all of those locations that I had been to and seen, and it felt like there's so much authenticity put with this. Probably what Willow Creek is most famous for, though, is, yeah, it follows a lot of the Blair Witch stuff. So they do the mockumentary at the beginning, and then they go out and get lost in the woods in the second half. But what I think it does different is I think it takes one of the biggest risks I have ever seen from a found footage movie, where there is a part where I swear it's like 15 minutes long. The camera is just positioned in front of the couple while they're listening to the noises outside and whispering to one another. And that sounds like the most boring thing ever, but it is incredibly tense and well done. The actors are doing a fantastic job on this. No cut. And, you know, because you get a chance to get to know these characters and get to like them. And it's, you know, there is a lot of built up tension with that. And yeah, it has a little bit of risk to it. And I think I really appreciate that. I think it does what a good found footage movie does and doesn't fucking show anything. You know, I think it's the only subgenre you can get away with that fully is not showing anything. So with that, we're going to move on to Twixt, Now and Sunrise. Betwixt, Now and Sunrise. So this movie originally came out called Twixt. It is a Francis Ford Coppola film, essentially about a writer who goes to this small town, realizes some weird stuff's going on, like the sheriff wants to write a book with him, but there's this weird, like, they find a body that's obviously had a wooden stake put through their heart. So, vampire movie. This is actually the second vampire movie Coppola had ever done, as far as I'm aware. I don't know if he did one over. I haven't seen his whole filmography, but I'm going to take a guess and say he hasn't. But we're going to put this right at the top because this movie is there we go, is really good. So I think if there's a way to describe kind of what I like when genre meets art house, and I think this movie, and it doesn't just meet it. It treats it almost like oil and water. There's these scenes that look absolutely artful in the way they're done, and then the next scene there's going to be like this very intense campiness that is very purposeful, very thought out. But because of that, you know, it can almost feel like it shouldn't work, but it absolutely does, like over and over again. Proves that it can. And there's these black and white artful scenes, and then they're mixed with almost like, I'm trying to think of a good explanation, but you know what? I think the best way to put it is if you ever wanted a double feature with In the Mouth of Madness, I think it works really well. I think, and you know, I honestly thought this movie came out in the 1990s. That's the way the movie looks. I was very surprised when I noticed it came out in 2011, I believe. And that was not even this new cut, which I think significantly reorders the scenes at the end. So I can't compare them. This one I really liked, though. I thought it was very effective. I thought it was very thoughtful and things like that. Sorry for the noises. That's my bad. So yeah, it's a different movie. If you can, I from everything I've heard, watch the director's cut. I think it's really worth it. All right, so because of the In Mouth of Madness, I think I had a wanting to watch a John Carpenter film because I was really waiting out to watch Halloween. So we're going to talk about Vampires, a movie very, very much hated. Essentially, it's about like the Catholic Church hires these mercenaries to kill vampires, and one of them wants to be Walking the Day. It's a Western movie, finally made by Carpenter, with James Woods. Siskel actually said that James Woods should have been nominated for an Oscar for this performance. I wouldn't go that far, but he's really good in it. So it's a lot of fun. I'm still surprised how much it's hated because the score is fantastic. So we're going to put this right here. Actually, I'm going to take a quick break. Sorry for the small interruption. My cats were doing something. I don't even know what they did. So anyway, we're gonna move on since I'm already noticed we're over an hour in, and we don't have many more. We don't have many more. So let's move on to the next theater watch, which was Venom Chapter 3. If you like the Venom movies, you'll like this one. I think it's pretty solid. I've enjoyed the whole trilogy. If this is, I would be okay with a fourth one. But if they ended here, I also do not have an issue with that. I think it's fun. I think it's campy. They're probably some of my more of my like consistent superhero movies. I'm very down on superhero movies a lot. So these I like. I'm into it, and honestly, I think I'm okay to put this right after The Void. We're gonna put it right here. Okay. All right. So we're gonna move on to the Skeleton Key. This is essentially, this movie is kind of like it feels very inspired by the others. If you've ever seen that, it's very gothic. It's very slow. It's kind of, it would honestly fit more. It's almost like proto 2010s horror in a way, where it's a little bit slower. It's a little bit more. I'm not gonna say the word elevated, but that thing that people like to call elevated horror, even though it's just horror. Hell, anyway, not gonna get on a rant. Not gonna get on a rant. Skeleton Key is good. Basically, this hospice nurse goes and works for John Hurt, who is usually hired because he has an iconic voice, who barely speaks in the movie. Which isn't a knock. John Hurt still does great in this movie. But she starts noticing some weird stuff's going around. I'm not going to spoil anything, but a lot of people compared this to Get Out. A lot of people said Jordan Peele ripped off the Skeleton Key. I don't think that. I think it's not even inspired, but they do go with like some similar ideas. So we're just gonna throw this one probably right here. It's good. It's good. I've rewatched it. I watched this back in the video store. It'd probably be a long time before I rewatch it again, though. All right, so this is when we start getting really out of order with stuff in the order I'm watching, which I already did that because I watched Kills and Ends, and then 2018, as you can see, is already down here. So I watched this shit out of order, especially the Halloween franchise. Does not matter. We're on to Halloween 4. Halloween 4 is phenomenal. I do not understand. Like, I get the love for Halloween 2. But I feel like this is a better version of what they wanted out of Halloween 2. Not the Rob Zombie one, the original. The Rosenthal one. I think it has probably the best autumn atmosphere in the series. I think Jamie is a fantastic protagonist. The only thing that holds this movie back is the shit mask. Like, that is really the only complaint that I find, is Michael isn't the most intimidating in the movie. But it really, everything else makes up for it. It's probably my favorite performance from Donald Pleasance in the series. I think they treat him really well. I think there's a lot of neat weirdness to the film that I think gives it a lot of personality. There's a scene where Loomis meets up with a preacher, and really they go through the thematic element of what Halloween is. And I think it's probably in my top 5 like scenes of the franchise. So we're going to put Halloween 4. We're going to move it, according to my notes, right here. Actually, you know what? It's out of my different order. I'm actually going to put it right here. I'm gonna make a change on the fly here. Halloween 4 is phenomenal. It's a really fantastic movie. It's one of the best. It was probably, to me, of the original sequels before we got the reboots, it's easily the best one that's a sequel. So Halloween 4, goated. The Wolfman. The Wolfman is good. I'm not going to talk about it all that much. I don't have a lot to say. I watch a Universal monster movie like every year. This year it was The Wolfman. It's good. I think it's one of the... I think it's aged fairly well. I think there's some elements that make it a bit of a slog at time, like for a little bit of it. But the sets are great. It has a great atmosphere. I love Lon Chaney Jr.'s performance. So yeah, we'll go there. All right, we're gonna get to Exist. So I watched one found footage Bigfoot movie. I watched another one. Yeah, this movie is not that good. It's funny how much I compared this one to Blair Witch Project, and this was made by the guy who made Blair Witch. And honestly, if we just take the directing and how confident he is with the way he films found footage, I think it's still shows why he's one of the best to do it. Why Sanchez does so well with it. However, the characters are terrible in this. Like, there is nothing, and it keeps any tension that could be there from not existing. Existing. Anyway, yeah, so not very good. Let's move on to the next Halloween film. I actually watched this with as a group watch with Kritpick. So if you're familiar with him, if you come from his channel, we watched this together when he was going through the Halloween series for the first time. And we and him will differ on this one. I think he was very big on this, and I think it's a solid little movie. I don't think it's great. One thing that annoys me that when Halloween does this as a series is, it was such a trendsetter with the first one, and it feels like it just borrows so heavily. Like this one's going to be criticized for borrowing so heavily from Scream and the postmodern slashers, and I get it. If it wasn't for Scream, this movie would be direct to video and would have Jamie Lee Curtis in it. And honestly, it would be a way worse movie for it. However, it's not what I look for in a Halloween movie. I think it's a very safe movie. I think it just doesn't work as well as I'd hope it would. I think the mask really it's a big point. That CGI mask is terrible. I don't know. I want to like it more. This probably used to be my favorite sequel when I was a kid, and just the more I watch it, the less into it I am. I think, it's one of those things where people talked about this being a more realistic version of what Laurie would deal with after Halloween. Even if that's true, which I don't think it is, I don't think you can define grief as realistic or not realistic. I think it's a much more boring version. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis and Adam Arkin are, they're acting their ass off to make these scenes work, but they're just not all that interesting. And, I think the movie could use to have a little bit more bite to it. I don't think it does. So, yeah, that's Halloween H2O. All right, so now we're going to get to a good movie, which is Scream. Yeah, so about Scream, let's keep going. Don't worry, it's going higher. It's going to keep going higher. It's probably going to go, I'm going to double check my notes. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, I definitely had it above here. I don't even know why I looked. Come on, move over. Move over, Dr. Sleep. It's Scream. Like, as much as I was complaining about Halloween H2O just being Scream, it's because nothing can properly be Scream. Not even the other Scream movies could be Scream. It's a masterpiece. It's fantastic. Unlike my co-host, Chris, I don't just think it's cute. If you are curious, you can go and listen to our episode where we talk about this. I think we did it last Halloween. So yeah, check out our podcast for that. All right, we're near the end, guys. We're closing in here. I actually got a pretty good list going on here. All right, so now we're gonna go on to Halloween 2018. Like I said, I watched these all out of order. Halloween 2018. I am going to put right here. All right, so 2018 was David Gordon Green's first time coming back. This was almost a decade since Halloween had an entry, and it's a little safe for my taste. I think I like these two better just because I find them a little bit more interesting thematically, but it's beautifully shot. I mean, as far as like, if you want a great look at what Halloween can be, even when it's done kind of safely, I think Halloween 2018 is the best you can get for that. Like, I think it does enough to justify its existence. It's not just remaking the first one. In a lot of ways, it's like Halloween 4. Sure, it's hitting similar beats, but they're still making it their own. They're still doing new and interesting things with the series. The mask looks great. I'd say beyond the original from the first one, I'd even say it's better than the second one, even though they use the same mask. These three have the best mask since the first one. Thank you, Christopher Nelson, for finally figuring out how to make these masks look good. All right. Thanksgiving. Nope. Is absolute trash. I'm going to put it here. I had a better time and laughed a couple times is the only reason it's getting above Exorcist the beginning. Thanksgiving is about a hand puppet turkey that goes and kills a bunch of people. And there's a lot of John Benet Ramsey jokes in this. I don't know why. I don't know. We were counting and I was like, holy shit, that's the third John Benet Ramsey joke in this film. And it's not like that was a recent event when this movie came out. So it kind of made me laugh because of that dumbness, but the movie is terrible. Like, I hear the second one's even worse, the third one is even worse. I'm not probably going to find out for a long time. This movie was terrible. So we're just going to move on to 3 from Hell. I have not seen 3 from Hell. since it came out in theaters. I went to a special showing. I'm trying to see where this is gonna go. Oh man, it's a little bit further down than I expected, but that seems. Did I not rank this one? Oh, I did. I did. I actually ranked it a little low, I think. So I'm actually going to move this one. For some reason, I had this like all the way down here, and I disagree with that. I'd actually put it like probably right here, to be honest. So, Three from Hell is the third entry in the Firefly trilogy, which included House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and Three from Hell. So one thing I think I appreciated more this time. The first time I watched it, I thought it was okay. I think I'd kind of set myself up like how are we gonna continue from the second one? And anyone who's seen it probably would wonder the same thing. They don't really explain it, but this one I think I do appreciate what it's going for. One thing I will say about all three of those films is aesthetically they're all very different. Tone wise, they're all very different. This is very weirdly reflective for Rob Zombie, and as hit or miss as I think he is as a director, I think it was kind of nice seeing him be this kind of reflective using these characters. And, yeah, he's trying to make them more of the heroes in this one, and it doesn't fully work, but this is also kind of a vibey movie. Like, it's not as concerned about plot or anything like that. It's like, it's they go from one thing to the next. So it starts as a prison breakout movie. And then it goes into this weird road trip movie, and then we're fighting Mexican wrestlers out in Mexico. I mean, it's just going all over the place, and it all works weirdly enough. Yeah, so I really dug it this time around more than I did last time. I was surprised. So I'm glad I rewatched that. All right, we're going to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, so about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Let's keep going. Yeah, we're just going to leave that there. I don't need to talk about that. All right. Burkittsville 7. All right. So Burkittsville 7 is similar to The Curse of the Blair Witch, which is right here. They actually made this. I mistakenly thought they made this with the Blair Witch Project, like they did Curse of the Blair Witch. This is actually anticipation for Book of Shadows. So, but I do think it complements the first one incredibly well. I think it does. It's a little bit more focused than Curse of Blair Witch because it's only talking about the kids that Rustin Park killed and their suspicion that the eighth one who claimed to have seen this may have actually had something to do with it. It's a very tragic movie. It's a very tragic story and how they present it. And, I think there's a lot of balls to sit there and say, oh yeah, that thing in Blair Witch Project, it was probably this one dude who's basically leading the documentary. He's like, yeah, that was probably a hoax. And I think I like that idea of putting seeds of doubt into the franchise, because I think it actually adds to the immersion to it. Like, because that's the big question is, people had, is this real? Of course it's not, but that was the question. And I think it does well with that. I think Burkittsville 7, like I said, it's a little bit more focused than Curse of Blair Witch because it's only dealing with one subject. And I think they do that subject really well. And it helps that I think they got the same writer from Curse of the Blair Witch, which is Ben Rock. I think that's right, Ben Rock. He was the director and writer of this one as well. So I think that helped a lot. All right, so now we're on to Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, the one that was widely hated, but thankfully has started to get a lot more appreciation over the last several years. And I love it. I love it. It's a near perfect movie as soon as I get it past upgrade. Halloween 3 is, of course, in case for some reason you're not aware, after Halloween 2, John Carpenter really thought the series should go into more of an anthology route. So this has nothing to do with Michael Myers. It has to do with a killer toy, like a killer Halloween mask, and this company that uses Stonehenge to. Here's the thing about Halloween 3. It's very obvious why this was hated. Like, this isn't a question of, I can't believe people hated this movie when it came out. It's very obvious why this movie was hated when it came out. They chose the weirdest premise to go with. And they chose a protagonist who's like a sleazy 46-year-old doctor played by Tom Atkins, who decides to not take his kids trick-or-treating so he can go on a road trip with a 20-year-old. And he ends up sleeping with her. He's a very sleazy dude. But yeah, like, That's Halloween 3, though. Those things of why it's easy to explain why people didn't like it are what make this movie kind of special. Like it's very unapologetic of what it's doing. It's really trying to get into the Halloween spirit. I love like the mix of tech and old world. Like there was always the pumpkin thing in the first two Halloweens, and this one it used like computers to build as you can kind of see right here, like using those to build the pumpkin itself. I think that's really cool. I think it's really neat. All right, so next we're going to get into another 2024 film, which is Time Cuts. So I actually, this works out. I actually just had a show with Disconnected on one of their podcasts talking about time bending slasher movies. It's a weird niche subgenre that I just really, really like a lot. Movies like Triangle, or I guess The Terminator fits in that, or movies such as that. And Time Cut fits in this too. It's going to sound very similar to Totally Killer. I do think it's worth noting that this movie came out before Totally Killer. It didn't come out before, but it was made before Totally Killer. So yeah, it's just the only difference is instead of going back in the 80s, this girl goes back into 2003. I think they nailed the needle drops. Does the movie always look like it's in 2003? No, I think that goes back to what we were talking about. It's what's inside. A lot of these Netflix movies just have a similar look, and I think it does hurt it some. But I think it did get quite a few things accurate. I've seen some posts where people are like, well, this isn't how it was in 2003. As someone who was, a kid in 2003 and does, have some nostalgia for it, people seem to take their own experiences and don't realize that that's not necessarily everyone's. Like, not people who lived as kids in 2003 did not experience the exact same things. Some things were more prominent. Some things, different styles go across different places. Like I saw someone complain about how Uggs were worn, and I was like, that's how I remember people wearing it. And I even went and looked in pictures, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely how we did at my school. But it's what gets popular on Twitter. I'm taking up for a movie that's not even great. It's fine. It's a fine little movie. I would probably put it like right after Resident Evil. It's fun enough. I had a good time. It has a Hilary Duff like needle drop in it. That's good enough for me. All right, 13 Ghosts. Have not seen this in a long time. And there's not a lot to say about it. Essentially, if you've never seen it, Matthew Lillard eats like every bit of scenery he possibly can while these people fight these really, really well-designed ghosts in this house owned by F. Murray Abraham. If that sounds good to you, then I would give it a go. We're going to put it about right here. All right, cool. All right, so now we're going to move on to, what is this? Oh, now we're on to Halloween. So everything you see coming up, these next 9 movies, I watched all of them on Halloween. So just a heads up. You see, what is this, 5 movies in the masterpiece section. Yeah, this section's going to get much bigger. Just giving you that heads up now. So we're going to start with WNUF Halloween Special. And I was kind of talking about with Curse of the Blair Witch that I really like when they put this much work in the aesthetic and making sure it feels accurate to that. Essentially, this looks like a news broadcast from the late 80s, early 90s about, you get the same like carpet commercial like 3 times. You get local commercials. You get things that obviously don't age well now, but it feels very authentic. I think there's only a couple times where I'm saying, okay, that's like stretching and more playing into the joke of the era versus trying to be an authentic representation of the era. But those moments are very few and far between. But essentially, it's all working up to the Halloween special of one of the news broadcasters, Frank Stewart, that sassy bitch, who, is going to take people into a supposedly haunted house with a rip-off Warrens and a priest. And weird shit starts to happen. So WNUF is near perfect, really. I mean, it's a very good movie. Let's see. I'm thinking if I want it in front of Upgrade or not, because they're like neck and neck for me. I'm gonna leave it here. I think when I was just reviewing my list, I had it after Upgrade, but this movie is fantastic. It's first time I've seen it. I want to watch the mega tape, which I think came out a year or 2 ago. This is going to be a yearly watch for me on October. This movie's just it's just fantastic. All right, so now we're on to Practical Magic, which is not a horror movie. So this is one of these ones that, like I said, it won't go here, just because it's not a horror movie. So essentially, what it's about is Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman are sisters who are witches, and they murder a dude by not accident, but the dude was kind of trash. So they murder him and try to hide it. And yeah, it's kind of like a little love whimsical story. It's very sweet. I was impressed by how much I liked it because it probably isn't my normal thing, but I did. I'm not gonna sit here and say I didn't love it because I absolutely did, and I'm gonna put it right here between Donnie Darko and Halloween Ends, which is not appropriate at all for the type of movie it is. But yeah, it's very sweet. I'd never seen it. I saw my sister about it, and she said it was one of her favorites. And I don't know how I didn't see it because I saw a lot. We grew up together. But yeah, great movie. All right, so we watched Three from Hell. Now we're talking about The Devil's Rejects. So second one in the Firefly trilogy. I'm sure many of you have seen it, so I won't bore you with the synopsis too much. Basically, three horrible people kill a bunch of people on a road trip. I mean, that's really what it is. It's kind of honestly, I would say Three from Hell is a better Natural Born Killers, but it definitely pulls like some of those ideas. And it's by far and not even close the best thing Rob Zombie has ever done in his career, and I would say it's the best, and I think it's a masterpiece. I really do. I think this is a perfect film in what it tries to do. It shouldn't work because, like I said, you're following three horrible human beings just killing people, and it's very unrelenting. I mean, it's so mean spirited, but it works for the film. And I mean, I think the needle drops are probably of anything I have here. This has the best. I mean, I remember my mom as a kid having the soundtrack, not even like the score, the actual soundtrack, because there's so much good music in this film. I still think the Allman Brothers Band opening credits is still one of my favorite opening credits. It still has the best use of Freebird in a film. Sorry, Kingsman, eat your heart out. The Devil's Rejects is awesome. Yeah. So now we're going to move on to Wolf Creek, which is probably the weakest movie I watched on Halloween. It is one of my favorites, though. I've seen Wolf Creek a lot. Wolf Creek is one of those movies like that I'm a little sad that Mick Taylor as a slasher villain did not get more recognition, because I think Jeff Jarrett does a fantastic job balancing this very goofy like country bumpkin type of thing, but he can switch it on a dime, like how quickly he can just be menacing and psychotic, and it's that balance. And I'm so excited that they're making a third one. I think my girlfriend, we talked about it, she prefers the second one. She wasn't the biggest fan of the first one because it's very bleak. I think they kind of follow like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you have this very bleak first one, and the second one is a lot more fun. It's a lot more goofy, over the top. And I think Wolf Creek's the same way, but just like that Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as much as I like the second one, I think the first one, having that bleak, unrelenting nature, is slightly better. I'm going to put it... I'll put it right here. Yeah, Wolf Creek is good. It's a great movie. Yeah. So, slasher killing people in the outback because he doesn't like foreigners. A very interesting movie. All right. So, I mentioned Wingard had really two really great movies. Your Next was one of them. The other one is The Guest. And we're going to just go ahead and move that up here. We're going to go ahead and move it. Try to decide between this area. You know, I'm going to put it right here. I think so. Yeah. The Guest is one of my favorites 2010s films. I don't know about that. We're actually gonna put it right here. Yeah. I feel better about it right there. Is one of my favorite 2010s films because it's about Dan Stevens plays this military guy who goes to this family's house because he served with their son and Macon Monroe's brother, and he died. He was there when he died, and he wants to come, according to him, help the family out, support them, things like that. And he finds unique ways to support them. He's obviously a little psychotic, and it gets into some strange areas. Now, I will say, and because I don't want to spoil too much in case you haven't seen this, I will say that there's been a lot of movies that will try to emulate Carpenter. I think this is the closest to ever do it. truly. Even and you can tell, like even looking at this poster here, these three should look pretty familiar. There is obviously a lot of love. This movie does take place on Halloween or near it, and the thing I like about it too is, if Halloween had stayed an anthology, and this is how I kind of like to try to sell this movie. Hypothetically, this is successful, and they keep it as an anthology. The Guest would fit. It keeps that John Carpenter feel. It takes place on Halloween, and I think it captures so much about that '80s feel without just being nostalgia bait. And yeah, The Guest, fantastic, one of my favorites. All right, we're gonna go Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. So this is the best way I could describe this is it's Man Bites Dog meets Scream. So it's a meta slasher with a little bit of found footage to it. So essentially, this is a world where Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger and Chucky are all real slasher villains in the world, and this news crew wants to understand how they prepare and how they do things like this. So they follow around a guy who wants to be with them, named Leslie Vernon, who is going through like how much cardio you need and how you prep and how these things are set up. And the reason that things feel convoluted is because there's a traditionalism to it that they need to do. And there is so much like fun to be had in this film. And I wish I could think of the actor's name who plays Leslie Vernon. And from what I can tell, it was his first role. He brings so much charisma to the role. Like, you think about these slasher villains being these like silent killers. He seems like a credibly nice guy. And I think that's a lot of where the humor comes in at. He does this almost as like a professionalism and an artistry where, the reality is he's murdering teenagers who don't deserve it. So yeah, it's an incredibly fun movie. I'm actually going to put it about right there. I think that's a fair spot for it. All right, we're getting near the end. So some yearly traditions. Trick or treat. Trick or treat is great. We're just going to go ahead and move it right there. So if you haven't seen Trick or Treat, it's essentially a anthology film that doesn't have a wraparound story. So all these are very well connected into the fact that, you'll see things out of order. You'll see different perspectives of the same events, but they all have different stories. Some of them you're talking about werewolves. Some of them you're doing a serial killer principal. You're doing a ghost story and, monster movie. And they're mixing all these together in one town on Halloween night. And Sam, of course, has become iconic as anybody else when it comes to just as much as Michael Myers when it comes to being an icon for Halloween. Very, very fun movie. It's surprising to me to look back on it and think that in 2007 they thought it was best to shelve this movie for a couple years. Yeah, so let's move on. We got two more, guys. We're almost at the end. All right, the Blair Witch Project. So, as much as I've kind of joked about how boring, like, the Blair Witch Project is. Yeah. So, the Blair Witch Project is, to this date, the greatest found footage movie ever made. And it boggles my mind that there isn't more found footage movie taking, like, they took a lot from Blair Witch, but I don't think they took the most important element. The reason people find the Blair Witch Project like it's real is because the history, like the world building around it, all feel incredibly real, thoughtful, like things that would actually exist. They trusted their actors enough to sit there and say, okay, you are going to go through this and you are going to have to ad-lib a lot of it. They're putting a lot of trust. There's no scripting in this. I mean, they have a script of what the things they're going to do and like some bullet points, but it's on the actors to come up with the dialogue. It's on them to do this. And I don't know if it's just, that seems like a lot of trust that a director and a writer doesn't want to give up, but it's what makes this movie special. To this day, I still think lights are out. This is still one of the scariest films ever made because nothing happens. You don't ever see anything on film. You can't, it could just as easily be about the witch doing this to them. It could just easily be people messing with them in the woods. It could be all sorts of things. And the thing is, none of them are confirmed because you never see anything you can't explain away in some way. It could be nothing. It could be in their head. Could be, I don't like the theory, but it could be, Heather, they're just trying to kill the main girl Heather in this. You just don't know. All right, we're on the last one, guys. There's no other way to end Halloween than with the movie Halloween. And yeah, so let's go up here. Let's keep on going. Nope, that's in the wrong spot. Halloween's the greatest movie ever made. So yeah, it's getting the top spot. It's getting the first spot. There's nothing I can say about Halloween that hasn't been said a million times. So I'm not even gonna do the same thing I did with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They are the top two for a reason. They are some of the best films ever made, not just the best horror films ever made. They're phenomenal films and they're influential. Yeah. So, all right, guys, we have done it. This was long. I think this went way over an hour. So yeah, it's like 10. I think I started this at 8:30. It doesn't mean anything to you guys since whatever time you watch this, but I think this is going to end up being like an hour and 20 minutes or so, if not longer. So here's the list, guys. As you can see, you have a few things we didn't watch. Color coordinated actually turned out okay. But yeah, so I'm not going to reread all these. If you'd like, just I'm going to slowly do it. So please let me know what you watched for Halloween this year. I would love to hear it. What are your traditions when it comes to this? This is way beyond what I normally do. And let me know if you like this. Maybe I won't do it every month, but I'd be happy to do this again if it's something you enjoyed. And let me know where you drastically disagree with me. I always love to hear that. Tell me how wrong I am for putting Halloween Kills in the top 10 of these movies that I've seen. Is it 10 in this one? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So yeah. So 10 movies at 10 out of 10. I usually don't watch that many in a month. So this is what I love about October. I get to just watch some of my favorite movies. So thank you all for watching. If you made it to the end of this, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. See ya.